This is a Wild Games Production podcast.
Recently who we used to work at Borders and Walden Books at the same time, and he had just finished a book, and he's like, oh, after this I kind of want to get into some barbarian fiction like Conan. And I was like, I can just give you some Conan stories. Like, I'll just suggest a few.
Sure.
My favorite way to digest Conan material is the Dark Horse comics from like the mid 2000s.
Yeah, they're good.
They're really good. The Carrie Nord stuff. Like, if anyone wanted a definitive edition of Conan, I would actually give them that. But this is not the fantastic swordsman of and sword say. What's the Conan role playing game?
Fantastic Swords and Swordsmen of Hyperborea.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's not Swords and Swordsmen, is it? That would be a terrible name.
But anyways, welcome to the Save or Die podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Crispy.
Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea.
It is sorcerers, okay.
Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. Hi, I'm Carl.
And we actually have a guest with us on this show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, mystery man?
I am Jonathan. I'm Carl's friend, a longtime role player, all that crazy stuff. You speaking a few minutes ago of the early days of the 80s bookstores harkens back to when I first started in this crazy hobby we have. So
people often bring up that you could just get, like, at Walden Books, that was when they got their first D&D box set. Was that like a trip down memory lane, me bringing that up?
Oh, definitely. That's I picked up the Errol Otis BasiX box was my first foray into it. I remember looking at it and kind of drooling over it and then running back to I think it was my father and saying, Dad, they've got this awesome game I'd like to buy. And I went back and they had one copy and another kid had it in his hands and I just watched him like a hawk. Like, please God, put that down because I want to buy that. And he eventually did and I got it. So I always want to find that kid and thank him like, you, if it wouldn't have been for you, you know.
It's a real like jingle all the way, like Sinbad the mailman.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So thank you, mystery kid out there, whoever you are. You let me buy my first Dungeons and Dragons box set, and I've been hooked ever since. So
Walden Borders, they're closed. I think Barnes and Noble is on the way out as well. I actually got all of my original D&D stuff from an independent bookstore that also closed. That's a weird thing. I think that people in the OSR are going to have to deal with soon. These like this fond memory of like first discovering, classic D&D or AD&D. Those places are just gone.
It's discovered through a YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Our television series, you got TV series. Right. A lot of people are playing it. So
that's Community. I wonder if Wizards of the Coast is ever gonna do another D&D show. Because I think we're in a climate where it could work.
I think it's a better format than a movie for a story based in D&D.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Because, D&D games a lot of times are episodic or serialized. So you can do that with a TV show more so than you can do it with a movie.
There's been talk of another movie in the mix. I don't know how, serious it is or how soon it might happen. But
I think it's pretty
that's
serious.
Not what we need. So
like Joe... Is it Joe Manganiello?
Manganiello?
From Spider-Man 1, Flash Thompson, is...
Wait, really?
Yeah, he was... Like, everyone's like, oh, he's from True Blood. No, he was...
I've never seen
Flash
True
Thompson.
Blood, but I've seen Spider-Man 1.
Yeah, that guy. is a gigantic D&D nerd. He's also from Pittsburgh. Represent. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we did in gaming. We did that a little bit before the show. I tried to play D&D last night, but we hadn't seen each other in a month, and that game was like DOA last night. So I'm gonna try again this weekend. Kind of continuing on, because I think it's in the last podcast, I killed one of my player characters because they don't quite know how to search for traps yet, and he got hit by a save or die effect. He's fine, it's magic. It's, if there's a high level cleric, you brought him back to life. But now they're trying to beseech the king to build an orphanage for the people who are running around with the street gang that they're hunting. And it was a nice night because I actually got to use the birthday present that Carl got me. Previously, I didn't have physical copies, original physical copies of the basic expert set for Multivac Cook. I have some that I printed off from the PDF I bought through DriveThruRPG, DNDClassics.com. But Carl was gracious enough to actually send me a copy of the original rules. So thank you for that, Carl.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got them and got to use them.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
What about you, Carl? What did you do in gaming?
Well, since we last talked, I actually gamed for a third time with DM Crafty, who's just a fantastic game master in the area. Runs a heavily house-ruled basic expert game. Again, at a game store, just anybody could walk up and play, and we closed the store down. The store was like, "We're closing now." You understand? And we didn't understand. We were like, "Wait, we got to stop."
I mean, you didn't have to go home, but you couldn't stay there.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, what about you?
I've been running a lot of public games. I work with a local gaming store trying to foster the community here because we have a lot of eager players, but very, very few experienced players are DMs. I'm running a game every week. It's not technically a B/X game, but I run it like one. Just don't tell anyone. That's our secret. And we've been running through the most recent campaign stuff from the current version of Dungeons and Dragons, but we have players that drop in and out, and I leave my players the decision. I leave it up to my players to make the decision. Do we have continue the campaign, or do we have a one shot? And when I run the one shots, that's when I often interject a lot of the more classic things, even to the point that I did Caverns of Thracia last year, and they liked it so much we went through the entire adventure. It was supposed to be just like a one-night thing, but it turned out to be an ongoing thing. So, but I do that every week, so it's a pretty regular fix, which is nice.
That sounds really cool. I've always wanted to take over a game store. Not take over, but host a game in a game store. But we have several game stores in the area who do have play space, and I've been in there for Friday Night Magic or to just shop, and people are doing outside of Adventure League stuff. They're there playing D&D. That's like their space, and I've always wanted to do that, but I have a big table. My buddies all have adequate space, so I guess we don't need it to go to a public space, but maybe someday if I'm wanting to branch out from my current group and just have a pickup game.
It's a different environment, that's for sure. I've like the game I'm running now. I have a 12-year-old young lady who joined the game. Her parents came in the store and said that they have a daughter that wanted to learn how to play D&D, and so we stuck her in my game. And her mom and dad actually joined us as well, so the whole family plays.
Are you guys doing 5th edition?
We are. I do 5th edition mainly because it's easy for them to grab it off the shelf. So.
Yes. And there are, when 5th edition first came out and the DMG came out, I did pore over that section of rules on how to basically make 5th edition run like BX. But this isn't a 5th edition podcast. So let's get back to basics with today's topic. The fanzine Back to Basics by Tom. Carl, will you edit you saying the last name over that for me?
Wilson. That's my impression of you.
All right, thanks.
Tom Wilson is his name. So you may want to take that again. I don't know what you want to do with your life.
It's fine. But we're just going to keep all this in.
I assume it's Tom. It's Thom.
Thom, like Thom Yorke from Radiohead.
I have no idea. I did not ask. I
I'm
should
pretty
have.
sure it's Tom.
That is a rookie mistake. I first encountered Tom Wilson on some of the Facebook trade groups that I'm always on, buying more stuff than I need and selling less stuff than I need to sell. He's trying to collect 100 copies of B2, and I have zero collector mentality, but that was just so insane a project to me that I was just like, okay, I support this.
That's why. Like, what's...
I don't know.
I was going to run
I don't
ads
know why
here,
he wants
but
100
now
copies of B2.
we're on this now. We'll get Patreon stuff in a second. That's weird. Like, I have a copy, like...
Well, I mean, to be fair, there are really some major differences between some of the printings.
That's true. That's very
At
true.
one point, B2 was printed with Holmes Basic information in it.
I think that's actually the copy that I physically own, the Holmes, because I got it at the same time that I got my Holmes Blue Book. So I'm almost positive it's that. I don't know.
It's still a weird project. Like, I mean, I don't have any of that. I don't want anything signed by anybody, because the moment you add value to something I have is the moment I hawk it and just buy a copy that's cheaper.
Yeah, you just turn it off.
I don't care about your signature. I just don't.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've talked about that in the past. I don't know. Like, I have copies of the I series and, like, Against the Giants and stuff like that. But that's still play. Sorry,
if
all the
I had a
listeners
copy of White Box D&D, it would be on the table. I mean, I don't want to collect anything. I will game with old stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing about White Box D&D is it's inaccessible at this point to people who actually want to use the rules to play. You should buy the PDF copies and print them at home and staple them together. Let's get on with the show. Here, listen to Vince and Glenn talk to you about shows and Patreon.
Are you enjoying the show you're listening to right now? Want to help support the show? Why not head over to the Patreon site, patreon.com/WGP. That's patreon.com/WGP, and help support the network for as little as $1.50 a month. That's right, $1.50 a month goes a long way. Thank you.
If AD&D is number one, have we got a podcast for you? On the Roll for Initiative podcast, DMs Vince, Nick, and Matt.
Hello, everybody.
And DM Matt.
Hello, everyone.
Check out all things related to the game that Gary built.
This is basically the module trying to get you to fight things when you shouldn't.
Yeah.
They basically taunt you.
They're being playful.
Yeah.
They're being playful.
Yeah.
They feature old and new modules, supplements, musings on rules, advice on DMing a game, and occasionally feature new writers and classic creators of all things 1E.
And think of it this way. Number appearing, 2 to 12. 12 demigods hanging out together?
Yes, but the Green Man has nothing underneath him as a classification. 0.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Just he's God of growth and abundance. We don't need to put down any other classification at all. We'll just give it to the Mudman.
That's the Roll for Initiative podcast. You can find it on iTunes or at rfipodcast.com. So, you like AD&D 2nd Edition but no podcast to listen to?
Guess what?
We got the cure right here.
I got a fever. And the only prescription is
The Thaco's Hammer Podcast.
You want me to put the hammer down?
Join DMs Glenn, Brian, Corey, and Full On Gamer as they discuss, debate, and review the world of 2nd Edition AD.
Go here.
Give me a gin.
Yeah, that's DM Corey ordering drinks.
Sorry, girlfriend's getting gin.
Rules, modules, supplements, clones, everything 2E is fair game.
Someone lied to you, and there's an opposed roll, and they won, so you believe the lie. I know, but I don't, because I, the player, know that they lied to me. But you, the character, have to act like you take the lie.
So listen into a podcast where number 2 is number 1. The Thaco's Hammer Podcast, the best damn 2nd Edition AD&D podcast ever. You'll find it on iTunes or at thacoshammer.info.
Ah, man, what quality ads. All right, let's get into the show proper here. We're going to be talking about Back to Basics, which is a fanzine created by Tom Wilson. I think it's just a little kind of pet project he's doing for fun. So we've basically got the first year. It's a quarterly publication. I believe you can get it through drive-through.
He sells it through drive-through as PDFs. When a new issue comes out, at that point you can get a physical copy.
Okay.
But once those have gone through, I don't know that he does extra print runs.
I know he has for info for back issues. He's got in his wanted section. He does talk about contact him to get older episodes. Where is the?
Oh, okay. So he might do individual prints for people.
Yeah.
Throwi Games, that's important to say, is his company that he runs.
Okay. It is a very small magazine. It's a zine. Like, it's a dozen and a half pages each issue. It's not insubstantial, but it is, it's just a few pages each month. I don't mean that as a criticism of him or of the magazine. I think it's very easy to digest, but it just sort of it's hard to really go super in depth when it's like, oh, this is like a 2-page adventure. But he's got, recurring segments each month. He does a product spotlight. He's doing interviews with designers and artists from the 80s and the classic D&D era. He'll always come up with a short adventure, maybe a 5 or 6 room dungeon. He has a section on monsters earlier in the issue before that segment where he will talk about the homebrew monster that he's going to use in those adventures. He'll do a magic item. Later editions, he starts doing multiple magic items per. And there's a comic and a wanted section, like a want ad. Carl, what did you think of this product overall?
I think one thing that he does really well is he creates a format and sticks with it. I like that because it provides expectation upon the reader of what they're going to get in each zine, each issue, and what you expect while reading it. I know I'm going to get a couple of monsters and a dungeon crawl.
And some treasure, and some new magic items. Yeah.
There's also a high quality of the output. His maps look great. The art in this looks great.
Yeah, I do want to touch on that. Like the graphic design overall, I think is really good. It's very clean. It's 2 columns, just justified text. So it's sort of in that newspaper sort of print. The cover artist that he has for this zine that I presume he's just putting together in a spare time, over a 3-month period, is amazing. It's an artist named Matt Ray, and I don't know that name off the top of my head, but he's a phenomenal artist. So kudos to Tom for snagging him for this project.
His covers are fantastic.
Yeah. All the covers are super phenomenal. There's not a lot of interior art. There's a map, and they're great. John, why don't you give us your thoughts on the issues?
I like that he really kept with the quote unquote zine format, and that all of his art is very succinct and easy to read and short. I really enjoyed that. I can pick it up, read 2 or 3 of them in a very short amount of time. Just a personal thing, I really like that when he does his product reviews, he puts information on the different printings, when it was available, and just kind of gives a little short summary of what was out there at the time. That was nice to see.
Yeah, I definitely do like how clean it is. He did a couple product spotlights that I do want to talk about. That's one issue. That's one feature he'll always do. It's something Carl and I have actually talked about doing a show on, but we couldn't find a lot of information on. It is Gavin Norman at Necrotic Gnome Productions, who has a product called BX Essentials, which is I think they're up to 4 volumes. I think it's 6 planned total, which is a reorganization of the BX rules. And we've talked about doing a show on those to see, because we were a little confused. We were like, is this a retro clone? Is it, because it states that it's restated rules, and I wasn't sure if that meant it's close but legally distinct to the 1981 box set, but apparently from what I can glean from his review is that it is actually just a reorganization, not a restating.
Right, it's like a table reference more than a rule set.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we don't have to talk about that product now. I still do kind of want to check it out. I'm interested in it because any more references or resources I can give to my players at the table so that I don't have to pass around and share copies of the book is always good, in my opinion. He also talks about that's in the last or most recent issue, which is issue 4. In issue 3, he talks about a product that I've also wanted to check out, which is the BX Monster Reference Index by Peter Regan from Square Hex.
Oh yeah, that thing looks cool.
Yeah, Peter Regan also used to do Oubliette Magazine, which we've covered on the show previously, and I'm a huge fan of. I'm a gigantic Oubliette Magazine fan. I have some other Square Hex. I have a notebook that he kickstarted, which is it's a kind of the same thing, spiral bound, probably the same dimensions. It's just graph paper and line paper. It's a tiny little pocket-sized notebook. It's great. I love that thing. But yeah, this BX Monster Index is it's sort of like the old Monsters and Treasure supplement from original D&D, where it's a table of monsters.
Yeah, which I use for BX. I use Monster and Treasures assortment, the one that came out with all 3 bound together.
Mm-hmm. It's a good tool. It's a nice resource. He does have a comic. I think the comic is really well done. This definitely does remind me a lot of just classic Dragon magazine. The Dungeon Delvers is the comic that he's got. One thing I don't really care for is he's also episodically creating the adventure parts of the comic, but the serialized adventure portions of the comic are like an issue ahead of where the comic is right now. So, if you read that portion, the Crimson Abbey of the Broken God, you're spoiling yourself for the comic.
Adventure I really portion like that actually. And so this is there's a web comic I love called Keep on the Borderlands, where somebody rolled through the entirety of Keep on the Borderlands, rolled all the rolls, and then illustrated it. Mm-hmm. And it's in progress now. And so what's interesting about it, even though I know Keep on the Borderlands relatively well, is that the characters' fates are left up to random rolls. So
yeah.
But I actually really dig that there's a kind of a intro to the dungeon and then a comic illustrating it, because in a way it kind of helps you visualize how you would run this. And I once it gets to a big enough thing to where you could run the whole thing, I think it would be kind of neat to run the whole thing and then hand your players these pages.
I agree. But the problem that I'm finding with the comic is it is actually about an issue behind where the adventure is. So if you're just reading the comic, which I like to do, you kind of already know what's going to happen in the comic. And I don't know, I guess I would like it if maybe it's just like an organizational thing where if
we're approaching it like I'm thinking of it as an after the fact DM tool, and you're just as a fan of comics wanting to read the comic.
Yeah, because it's really charming. The art style is like really nice. I like the characters. I do like the intro to the characters. I think they're like really interesting. Their interactions in the comic themselves, I really like. Like these characters, you can kind of see that they all they have a history and like a dynamic. But so spoilers for people who are going to read these, I guess, as I'm complaining about spoilers. Like, I know that when they get to the crypt of like the Crimson Monks, that all the skeletons on the sarcophaguses are going to come to life and attack them. But in the issue where it explains that in the module portion, they're just now opening the door to the the sarcophagus room.
I mean, to be fair,
if there's a room full of skeletons, you're definitely gonna fight those skeletons.
4 seconds of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Anyone who has ever watched anything pertaining to Dungeons and Dragons knows that I'm gonna have to fight those skeletons. But, suspension of disbelief.
I respect that he's keeping with the old Dragon format. I'm thinking back to Wormy and Phil and Dixie, where the comics were always at the end.
Yeah.
But I think if he moved the comic to the beginning of the zine, it would have a better impact, because it really almost feels as if the comic is aimed at the players and the adventure is obviously aimed at the dungeon masters. So
that's something I was kind of talking about. Like, even if just organizationally, if he put the comic portion before the rules breakdown, it would be great. Yeah. I don't know if, because the comic it's a full page comic, it's 6 or 7 panels. That might be with just the graphic design of the zine itself, that might be a problem. So I can respect that there may be a limitation there for why he's doing it that way. There's, want ads. He's got his, any condition copies of B2 Keep on the Borderlands, and the Moldvay Basic and Expert rulebooks. Then there's, an ad for the BX Companion, which we did an episode about several years ago. And he's got some...
I think one thing worth mentioning that he does go into, and I really enjoyed reading this because he's very articulate about expressing this isn't really a fanzine strictly about one version of Dungeons and Dragons. This is a fanzine about basic Dungeons and Dragons and all its incarnations. And he really has, I think it's in issue 3, where he talks about how there's kind of it's in issue 3, the edition overlap, a letter from the fanzine creator. He starts each issue with a letter from the fanzine creator, which I really like reading. He talks about how little the rules really matter, especially between versions of Basic, which are some of the closest versions of D&D.
Yeah.
I like the way he puts it, where he says, when you think back to the best moments you've had in gaming, it never had to do with rules.
No. It's always something that you did or a story beat from your DM. I like, this was my favorite letter from the fanzine creator, because he throws a bunch of shade on people who are like, Back Me is a completely different game than Moldvay Cook. And it's like, yo, dog, it's not. It's you gotta get into real minute details to say that this is a completely different game. If you talk to anyone who played original D&D or even AD&D in the 1980s, literally every single one of them will go, yeah, we combined all this stuff together. It was the same game.
I think there's a fair chunk of them that will say we did not realize
that they were different. In 2002, after a complete departure from the old system of D&D from the 70s and 80s, I was combining AD&D stuff with my 3rd edition stuff.
Sure.
You can make it work. You roll a d20 and you go, is this number high enough to go? Yes. And then you do it.
We were talking earlier about retailers in the 80s and Walden Books and whatnot. And big box stores were where D&D really hit its stride. And none of those people in the 80s had a clue that any of this stuff was different. So everything was grouped together. And also, too, availability was so much lesser, I guess is the word I'm looking for back then, that when stuff was in stock, you bought it. You didn't buy, I'm not going to go there and I'm only going to buy the AD&D stuff. No, if there's D&D stuff there, you buy it, because the chances of it being there the next time you come back are pretty low. So
if it has dungeons in the title anywhere.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about that.
This is a paperback. What's this?
Oops. Dungeons of the Highland by Kate McKinnon. Not Kate McKinnon. We gotta cut that name out. That's a real person. That is not a made up fantasy romance novelist name. That is a real life actress who is currently active. Sorry, Kate McKinnon. I loved you in Ghostbusters. Man. Trying to think of what else we can kind of cover on this. I like the monsters that he's giving. There is one, like, kind of covering them. There was an adventure where you fight Batman. Well, Bat Snake Men.
Bat snakes. Winged snakes.
Yeah, Bat Snakes Men. Man, bear, pig.
See, I was picturing bird wings for some reason, which doesn't make any sense.
I thought he expressly said they were leathery wings. I mean, like snake men with bird wings. Like definitely, there's a real world.
Yeah, he does say leathery
in,
wings.
Give Aztec culture. One thing so I'm actually gonna get a little critical here. I'm trying to be nice, trying to say nice things, because I think I love zines. I think they're great products to have. And it's cool that people take time to make free content. Well, not free content, cheap content for, this hobby to grow it and bring people in. Yeah, this thing's $2.50 for issue 3. That's
for
cheap.
A print copy.
For a print, yeah, that's cheap.
Yeah, if you want the PDF, it's $1.50.
That's less than a cup of coffee. That's less than a magazine. You can't buy People for $2.50.
Yeah. You should have chosen a different magazine.
Oh no, I am just not on the ball tonight.
Now you're on the internet talking about buying People. Oh,
it's okay. On Critical Wits, we definitely talked about killing all the old people, so it's fine. That's a thing on record, I'm saying, and also a government watch list I'm on. The Snake Men. It's weird to me that they have a poisonous bite when their top half is the torso of a man and their bottom half is a snake part. I feel like that should be reversed if you're gonna have a poison attack. Also, I will say Tom Wilson loves Saber Die effects, which is the name of our show, but also probably one of my least favorite parts of classic D&D.
Oh, I like Saber Die.
They're fine. I think they're best in moderation.
I think it depends on what type of game you're running entirely. Yeah. And there are games I run where I would lean away from them, and there are games where I want to have character rotation be a part of the game.
Yeah, I definitely don't shy away from them, but I think that it should be done in moderation. It just seems like it's a running theme with a few of his monsters. There's a mastodon war machine in one of the adventures that has the ability to spit a glob of poison, and I'm just I don't understand why this machine has that. Being
pretty weird. A Saber Die poison launching mastodon.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mastodon War Machine is a cool idea. I really piloted by kobolds who are extorting the local townsfolk. I think that's a cool idea.
Yes, and what I like about these types of modules where they're not story based but they're environment based is that's a game that I could run probably 5 times with 5 completely different outcomes.
Yeah, and they're always gonna react differently. I don't know. I guess it's don't forget about reaction rules. Players, if you're playing in these adventures, it's we should check and see what they're gonna do before we charge in. That's another thing, getting back to what we were talking about, the difference between kind of new school D&D and old school D&D is everybody, the order of operations in BX and homes and things like that is that you roll for initiative and then the DM checks for reaction and then they will react however they're going to react in that round. But the players, if they declare their actions to just flat out attack, then that's when you get you can have the moral victory of you just killed all the kobold babies because you're trigger happy. You're a loose cannon, McGruff. I don't know. I don't know what's with me and names right now. Everybody,
you're really bad on the ball. I'm usually really bad with names. And
McGruff, the crime dog, 2nd level veteran.
We're taking your badge for killing kobolds. That really does seem kind of cannibalistic in nature.
You took a bite out of crime, but also a unique culture with their own rules and laws.
See, I completely shy away from that stuff. I don't like adding it in my games. I don't like mixed morality on 90% of my monsters. They are inherently evil creatures.
Mhm.
You will never encounter goblin babies in my games. It doesn't happen.
Same, actually. I'm not like that's not my flavor of D&D, but it is sort of like it's a good teaching tool for your players to be like, hey, you should maybe like, you know, the world isn't monsters. Maybe aren't necessarily always out to kill you. They're they may be monsters, but
right. But there are other
like Hitler.
There are other creatures I will do that with. I actually do that with like giants. I think there's room to make giants kind of.
Yeah, the gold dragon I think is a good like classic example of that.
Well, I actually ixnay gold dragons in my games too.
Oh, really?
I only have evil chromatic dragons in any of my games. I don't have this. There's no such thing as a good dragon in my Dungeons and Dragons. I know that's a huge departure from the lore, but it doesn't exist.
Just a preference, Carl, or what?
Well, because I like the idea in a game of Dungeons and Dragons for the dragon to be set up as the ultimate boss monster. And so fighting a dragon at my table is always a virtuous task. They should be destroyed because they are inherently evil creatures that are a blight upon the world. There's no dragons out there doing good things for people. They are greedy, nasty, evil creatures that should be destroyed. So it always makes that like an honorable goal, something that people should be striving towards.
I met a old school player at a convention in Calgary, Alberta years ago. I'll never forget what he said. He had the same thing. He didn't allow good dragons in his games. And I loved what he said, and I encourage you to steal this. He remember him saying that there are no good dragons in my game, just like there are no friendly dungeons.
Yeah.
And he said, a game of Dungeons and Dragons, the dungeons and the dragons are both against you.
Yeah, that's my exact mentality on it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of the mythic underworld concept, where the dungeon itself is an antagonist that sort of doesn't operate by the established rules of reality, where that's why doors close automatically. That's why all monsters have infravision. It's because the dungeon is trying to kill you.
Yeah, I actually like connecting all those things in my games where the same driving impetus entity, whatever it is, behind dragons is also behind orcs. It's also behind these dungeons existing.
I just use it as like, it's the cosmic force of chaos. Is sort of how I treat chaos as this is something that wants to destroy not just all goodly civilizations, but life in general.
We've gotten off the rails.
We have.
I think, to kind of get back on track here, I think we should each talk about one monster we liked and one magic item we liked, because he has both of those things in each issue.
Yeah. Jonathan, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, for sure. Monster-wise, I like the Stone Gorilla because it has such a huge potential for surprise. I think that would be a great monster to throw in because I would never suspect a gorilla statue is actually being alive and coming to life. I can have a lot of fun with that as a DM. Nice, simple, nothing elaborate about it. And it's not something your players would expect. That's really the union between the primate and a wingless gargoyle. It's like that's a love affair if you've ever heard one. I also like the Belt of Flying. I thought the Belt of Flying was just a nice, simple magic item that has a lot of potential, and I love that he answers the obvious question that your players are going to forget about how you can wish to cease flying at any time, even while in mid-flight. I know that's going to happen. Someone's going to turn it on. Those are my favorites.
Carl?
My favorite, I really liked the mirrored runts.
Oh, yeah. The mirrored runts were pretty cool.
That launch your spells back at you. I think that's such a really neat idea for basically this non-threatening little monster and as soon as you launch a magic missile at it, you kill your wizard.
Yeah, I like that adventure. That adventure kind of stuck out to me because you encounter the mirrored runts, and they're not really the antagonists of that adventure. They actually want to hire you, which I thought was like, oh, this is like a neat like classic D&D of like, haha, I've pulled the wool over your eyes. You're dead, Presto Sarcanicus, first level wizard.
For magic item, again, it's like Jonathan, really, really simple one. I really like just the Never Hungry Bowl. I like stuff like that kind of, they're I don't want to say mundane magic items. I mean, that's obviously a powerful magical item. But it's not something that's going to shift the nature of the campaign or even the power of the player character, but it is something that they can have that's nice and magical, and it gives them something to kind of lean on in their narrative of like, they don't have to worry about purchasing food at the inn or even going hungry in the dungeon. So that's fairly powerful in its capability of keeping you alive through long dungeon delves, but it's only going to help one person because it's only able to conjure 3 meals per day.
I thought it fed 2 people. The meals were big enough for 2.
Well, yep, you're right. Food enough to feed 2 people. Sorry, I'm a fat guy. I said, I'm going to eat all that soup. You don't know me, Thom Wilson.
For me, I think my favorite monster to come out of this, oddly enough, is the Mastodon of Calamity. I would change a few things about it. But I definitely did like this monster. There's not enough, for my money, there's not enough big monsters in classic D&D. Like, there are a few, but this is, it's got 9 hit dice, it's AC 3, it attacks 4 times per round. I think it would be a great kind of cap monster to throw off in an adventure. I would probably make the poison just a breath weapon, just like it shoots fire. And I would also make it, there's an odd bit that it is indiscernible from a regular elephant. I would just make it like a Trojan horse, like made of wood, with like, make it clockwork or something like that.
Yeah.
I would also not have it be a saber die effect. I would treat it like just like a breath weapon, like a dragon's breath weapon. And then from that same issue is my my choice for magic item, which is the map of Mot Nai, which is sort of like it's a nice thing where you basically always have a map of the wilderness you're in.
It's like fantasy GPS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's once per week. It's more of an artifact. That's something I noticed him doing as the issues progressed, that the magic items became more, instead of like single use or like lower level magic items or magic swords, they became more like artifacts, or what I would define to be an artifact. It's got a name attached to it. But once per week, they can activate the map and cast a spell with the effects of Commune, and they can ask questions about the location of an object or a place or a person, and then the map will mark it with an X if it's within 50 miles of them. I think that's really cool. Like, if you're hunting someone, you can pull up your map and go, where's Kardrak Sin? And it'll give you the location of it. That's Kardrak Sin is the evil magic user you're hunting, I guess. But I don't know. Do we have anything else to say about these?
The one thing I really liked about not the one thing. There's a lot to like about the Mastodon of Calamity, but one of the really cool things about it is you can take it over.
Yeah,
you can you can end up driving that thing, and that kind of makes me want to talk about the adventure elements, because this is one I when I was reading through the adventures, I really like them because I mean they're brief, one shot. You'll be done with these in a night, but they're kind of like have some room to build upon with ideas. The Mastodon one specifically, I would change it. I wouldn't make it that they stole this from good people. I would change it to where they stole this from bad people, and so.
Well, I mean, they stole it from gnomes, so I think like you guys are saying the same thing.
In my games, gnomes are good people, and in Crispy's games, gnomes don't exist. But if he stole it from somebody who was an evil entity, then that means they would be coming after you for their Mastodon if you take it over, and it gives you that kind of adventure hook, pulling them into a deeper environment, a deeper narrative than just now we have this new item.
One thing about the Elephant of Calamity, I love the idea of it. Like Carl said, I really love it. You can take it over. But one thing that made me laugh and made me kind of scratch my head is he replaced the trample. Took the trample rules that the normal elephant has and the expert rules, and he gave it a tail spike or a spike tail. And I laughed because I remember it's nearly indiscernible from the real thing. I'm like, I've never noticed the spike on an elephant's tail, but I'll have to look at somebody one. So, but no, he
said nearly indiscernible. That's the discernible part.
But I think it needs the trample. I think, especially being automaton, I think a large, something you can control. Oh, heck yeah. If I get control of the thing, I'm going to be trampling all sorts of stuff. That's the most fun part, right?
I do like the idea of, like, player characters with grappling hooks being able to, like, grapple onto the top of it and climb in and jump into the cockpit and have a melee inside.
This is, yeah, absolutely. It's an AT-AT.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I like that you power it with magic items. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff about it. I like that you just stick a magic item in it, and then you lose that magic item, but you power it up for a little while and get to fight in a giant mastodon.
Yeah. So I think we all agree I had the best pick.
Yeah. We failed. You won.
It's okay. That's why they pay me the no bucks. I guess I think there is one thing we haven't really talked about, which he does give a commentary on a spell each issue. It's it's just like his opinion, man. So I don't know how much I can comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything negative to say about it. Yeah, I mean, Charm Person. I run Charm Person a little bit differently. He talks about it being kind of a servile type of thing, where if you charm someone, they're your servant. And I run Charm Person where if you charm them, they think you're their friend.
Yeah, that's it. I'm pretty sure that's
I'm not a servant
how
to
it's
my
supposed
friends.
to be.
But that's just how I run it. I mean, and I think Sleep is definitely a powerful first level spell, and I think Fireball is definitely a powerful third level spell, and I think that's just one of the things about old school D&D is that the spell levels don't necessarily dictate the spell power.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay to have powerful spells. Like if you get one per day, I think it should be strong. That's your one, So I guess we'll move on here. Is this a product you would recommend? Jonathan?
Yes, I would. I think the price is right for the amount of content you get. And like Carl said earlier in the show, the consistency is there. And that to me is a very important part of our product that I'd like to support, that when I give you my dollars, I know what I'm going to get every time I get your product. And he definitely delivers on that.
Carl, what about you?
I agree. I mean, I will continue to purchase this in PDF format. I mean, the printout, I have a physical copy of the first issue, and the printout is great. I mean, it's on really nice paper. It's a really clear printout, but I don't, it's not something I would ever have the full thing of at my table. I would probably print out one of the quests and maybe run one of the mini modules. But I don't know if I would ever need the whole thing in print. So as a PDF, and it's always there to go get, you can go back and get all 4 issues we've talked about today through RPG Now, $1.50 a piece. And I think each and every one of them is worth $1.50. But yeah, I agree. I agree with Jonathan agreeing with me about what I said about it being consistent. I think that's a big deal because this could easily be a mishmash every issue, and you're never really sure what's going to come. And it being so consistent, you're going to get an adventure. You're going to get monsters and magic items, and you can easily reskin any of these adventures if you don't like winged snakes for whatever reason. You can still use that dungeon, and it's well drawn out, and you have it there, and you can just say, okay, I'll have this be the dungeon that happens to be in the direction the players went that I haven't prepped for.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing he does kind of talking about the consistency, he did talk in one of the letters from the fanzine editor where he, a lot of people have been like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, you should make it this many pages, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, everybody slowly roll. I don't know if I'm ready for that. So I'm cool with just making it like 12.5 pages or so every quarter. Eventually, maybe, but I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready for that commitment. It's not you guys, it's me. I definitely, I also am going to go with I think this is a great product. I definitely think for the price, it's right. You get half hour's worth of reading, maybe 45 minutes if you're going real in depth with it. For, $1.50. So the price you would pay for gas station coffee, which is, that's a great price. I agree with Jonathan agreeing with Carl about the consistency. I think that's a strong suit of it. And again, even if you don't get it in print, if you have, I don't know if this is a thing I can tell people to do. If not, if you wanted to print out the portions of it or even the full physical thing from PDF on your own dime, you could do that. It's 12 to 16 pages each issue. Print that stuff double-sided.
I don't think it would save you a lot of money to print it out yourself, honestly.
Probably not. It probably would.
You could print it at a lower quality than he prints it.
Yeah.
That's true. But if you wanted it to look as nice as his version, you're not saving money by printing it yourself.
Well, really. Yeah, if you wanted to just have it as a resource to you could print the dungeon that goes along with the comic. You could just print out those pages and put them in a 3-hole punch them and put them in a binder. And then when that comic series runs its course, you have that whole adventure, which is really cool.
Yeah, I absolutely plan on doing that. I want to print out the comic and have it as a little handout and run these adventures. I run lots of games with kids. So I think that would be cool to have this handout for after the game of this is the adventure you just played. So keep it kid friendly, Tom. That's my request.
I think he probably will. Just because, I don't think that there's a place for it. Just the tone and style, it doesn't seem like it would go with adult themes. It's very.
Oh, you never. I forgot to warn people about this. That Keep on the Borderlands webcomic that I love. It's great. It's a fantastic comic. Not kid friendly. Not safe for work.
Okay. But I think that'll do it for us for this episode. I guess we can respond to an email here. So this comes from Alex B. He says, first, I wanted to say how happy I am that you guys kept the podcast going. I hope that there are no more big lineup changes in the near future. I have a couple of questions to make this email worthwhile. First, do you ever have trouble getting people to play BX, or BECME, or OD&D, or any clones thereof? I find that some people prefer 3.5 or 5th edition, but are happy to play AD&D if that's what I'm running. But even AD&D fans will complain about the 3-point alignment system, limited race and class selection, and racist class. I personally like limiting demi-humans because I hate the Mos Eisley Cantina style of play. I figure most fantasy worlds are 90 to 99% humans, but adventuring parties are mostly non-human, often. This leads to my second question. Do you have any strong feelings one way or another about the aforementioned Mos Eisley style play? Like I said, I prefer the 3 humans and a dwarf type of play to the Dragonborn, Tiefling, Gnome, and Drow party. What do you guys think? Thank you for your time and for answering my questions. Alex B. I definitely run a more humanocentric world, but, that's just even that word comes from, reading Holmes as a kid. I definitely do have problems getting people to play BX or Back Me or Swords and Wizardry, or OD&D, because people, I don't know what it is, where it comes from. There's this weird trend, I think, in role-playing games to take the game portion out of role-playing games. Like, people want it to be more of a simulation or more of a narrative function, and I find that, rolling a d6 and plotting out your movements and sort of even having metagame thinking of how to tackle problems is really frowned upon, and I don't think it's that big of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. That's my take. What about you guys?
I agree that BASIC, among any of the versions of Dungeons and Dragons, is the one that is most like a game first and the other parts second.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would say even as early as AD&D, it started kind of escaping that. I think the biggest resistance you will get for playing BASIC is race as class.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the number one thing that people hear and they go, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand it and I don't like it. And there was a point where I thought I would never go back to that style of play. When I first came back into role-playing games, I was playing Castles and Crusades. I thought it was a great system. I still think it's a great system. But I ended up getting the red box as a birthday present from my sister because she found a bunch of RPG material.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the red box, and that's what convinced me to go back to kind of my roots were Rule Cyclopedia, going back to a racist class game. And I have found I vastly prefer it. The reason I prefer racist class, it provides distinct differences between demi-human society and human society, where in a race and class separate game, all of the races sort of kind of feel like humans with different powers. And not only does it determine their culture, I want to be able to run a game in a world where there are no elven thieves, because the concept of ownership is so different in elven society. Whereas as soon as you make it race and class separate, not only are there elven thieves, there are a high percentage of the thieves that exist because the elven racial powers complement the thief class powers.
I do think that, like, I don't know, I feel like there is a trend towards, against racist class when you get more granular with the rules and sort of start getting more ability options. Like, I am, as everyone is very well aware, I love elves. Like, that's the thing that I want to play. But in newer editions, I'm going to play an elf fighter thief. I'm going to play an elf ranger. I'm going to play an elf thief. I'm going to, or an elf fighter wizard or an elf wizard. I'm not going to, hypothetically, I can't say this for true because I actually am doing this. So you wouldn't play an elf barbarian. I am doing that because it's funny to me. But
see, that's the other reason why I dislike race and class separate is that type of style where you're not drawn to a character because it's a concept you like. You're drawn to a character because it's wackadoo and weird, and you think it would be.
I definitely agree because that's happening in my 5th edition game. I was like, hey, like, you guys can be anything that was made by Wizards of the Coast, playtest material included, and I've got a bunch of turtle men, I've got like a goblin, I've got a frog barbarian, and it's just like, this is not my flavor of fantasy. Like, and I think that's what it comes down to, is there's definitely like an aesthetic to classic D&D that even exists, I think, outside of AD&D.
I agree.
Where it's like the Rankin and Bass Hobbit and like Lord of the Rings movies. You know, like Legolas in an open blouse with his long blonde hair laughing merrily. That's the fantasy I want to play. I don't want to play like I don't even want to play like the Tui, like a band of adventurers in the forest poring over a map. And I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Like
well, here's the reason it doesn't sit well with me. And it's just because it doesn't make sense in the narrative for simple townsfolk to be terrified of goblins if you're an 8-foot dragonborn that they're seeking help from.
I hate non-standard races. I'm gonna get out there. I hate it. Like if you listen to the show and you know me personally, I'm mad at you because you wanted to play a gnoll. Because it's like, how do you it is unrealistic to go, well, I mean, this person's a gnoll, so now every single time that they freaking come to a new town, I have to friggin' like make all the town folks mad at them and hate them and want to run them out of town and like fearful of them, and that's exhausting because it's every single time. Like that's what realistically would happen.
I think also when you deal with these more fantastic races in the game, and I specifically Tiefling, Dragonborn, when those become part of the core of the game, then the other fantasy elements that your group encounters become less fantastic. It's hard to be inspired by the first time you encounter a special monster when you have special monsters from the start traveling with you.
Yeah, your Thrycreen monk. It's not gonna. It's like, oh, like you've happened upon the fantastic Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, and it's like the party of the Thrycreen monk, the Aarakocran ranger, the deep known illusionist, the Dragonborn paladin, and the Tabaxi. These are not like garbage words that I'm making up. These are all real things.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I'm really curious about your ideas on, because I know you run a modern game that you move towards classic. I can't think of words today. I stayed up really late last night registering for North Texas RPG Con, trying to get into a Holmes basic game because there was a slot open, but then it disappeared. So, well, you run a modern game with classic ideals present.
The challenge in what you just said about running a modern day game with the classic ideals is, if your elves can be whatever class your human can be, if your elves encounter NPC elves that are not hostile, what makes them different? Like, what makes them distinct, and why? And I really don't like the fact that having class separate from race with the demi-humans, it doesn't make them feel like a race. They feel more like a character, an attribute on the character sheet. And that's what ends up happening in the modern day games is, like you said earlier, someone said earlier, people don't take races because they want to play their fantasy ideal of an elf or a dwarf or whatever. They take the race because they've got the best attributes for the class they want to take in the end. And the whole race aspect and culture gets lost in between. And I always have this running internal monologue that if your elven magic user, or let's say elven thief, meets up with an elven civilization that has no thieves, that would be a huge point of interest. Like, how the heck are you a thief? Elves aren't thieves. And if there were thieves, how are they different? And how would you learn from it? And I think it adds something players rarely go into, because they look at it not as I'm playing a fantasy ideal. They look at it as I get X, Y, Z bonuses to whatever. And I don't like that. I think that takes a lot of the fantasy out of the game and makes it more into almost like a board game, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it makes it into something that's not telling a story. It's more making it something of a numbers game. So that's kind of my spin on it. It's hard for me to enforce race versus class in current editions, not because the players necessarily don't like it, but sadly, race and class being separate things are so ingrained, especially in the younger kids who grew up on video games. You don't see video games where you pick a race and that's also your class. So they're not used to that. It's a very foreign concept, and they often rebel against it. Like I said earlier, they're not really. That's not something. They're like, you. What do you mean I can't be a fighter if I'm an elf? I have to be a magic or whatever the case may be. And so that takes a bit of a mind shift. So I kind of push it into the gameplay later on. It sometimes works out. So
I think anytime that you have something that modifies the character more than the base decision, you end up referring to the character by those numbers instead of the character. So like when you have race and class separate, it stops mattering that your character is an elf or a dwarf, because it only really matters that your character is a fighter or a thief or a wizard. That's what pertains more to your character's abilities. And then when you add skills on top of that, then your character becomes more of a list of skills than a class. It matters less that your fighter is a fighter. It matters more that his perception skill is this and his stealth skill is that, and that's what now defines the character list of skills. And so what I like a lot about classic basic D&D, well, specifically basic D&D, because that's another point of discernment that I think a lot of people, especially younger people like myself who go back into these games, they don't realize that racist class was a concept that was only really fully introduced in 1981, and OD&D is a race and class separate game, even though there are limitations on it. But when you go back and play a racist class, a BX or a BECME game, it really is, what type of character do you like from your fantasy fiction? Let's put that in this game instead of what powers and skills do you want.
I definitely think that, when you start getting into those options, it's really hard to define what a class is. We did an episode of Critical Wits, which was another show I did a few years ago, where we actually did talk about classes versus career versus archetype, and I made the argument that I think that old school D&D definitely deals more with archetypes. You have your elf adventure, you have your dwarf adventure. Your dwarf is always a fighter, but your dwarf is definitely Gimli, or you're the rough and tumble, ready to go fighter who hates goblins. Whereas I think when you start introducing more options, it starts to become more about your role in combat and your role of how you mechanically solve problems. I think it and the game is about fighting. Like I'm not going to make the argument that D&D isn't about killing stuff, because it is. It has its basis in wargaming. But I feel, and I don't have any way to concretely say this. I feel that when you are more limited in your scope of choices, that the choices that you make become more impactful. So I could roll up a character with a 13 strength and a 15 constitution, and I could go, I could be a fighter with that. That's like great fighter score. Or I could be a dwarf. And just that simple binary choice makes a huge difference in how I'm going to play that character. Whereas in a more modern game, I could take those scores and go, well, I could be a fighter, but realistically, I should be a barbarian. I could be a half orc and get the bonus to my strength score to bump that up, so I'll be equally strong and tough. Or I could, go this way and really double down on Constitution. And I feel like you start running those numbers, and you're not making those choices because it's like, oh, I want to play a dwarf because that would be interesting with what I have rolled, versus like, how can I best capitalize on what I've rolled and make the best mechanical choices. I want to jump back in because I feel like we've been on this for a while. Things that people hate about classic D&D and makes them like real reticent to play it. I don't know. I know Carl doesn't do this, but I do. I'm not sure about you, Jonathan. I don't do variable weapon damage. I run everything as a D6. Because I like the idea of, one good strike with a dagger is going to be just as deadly if you hit somebody in the throat as it would be with a sword. And that's something players are just like, I don't get to use all my cool, colorful dice? What is that? People do not like that.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one because I can see both sides of that issue where the variable weapon dice can represent the different weapons, but like you said, it's not as much the actual weapon, it's how you use it. And you can do the same amount of damage with a dagger as you can with a halberd, depending on who you are. I've never used the same weapon die, but I've always wanted to. It's one of those things I'd like to do. I just need to have the right group to be able to do it, and I can experiment and see. Maybe one day.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, just as recently as last episode, where I said I only like a change with a mechanical change in the way the weapon is used. So I like variable weapon dice, but only insofar as if you use a two-handed weapon, you're getting a bigger damage die than a one-handed weapon, because otherwise no one would ever use a two-handed weapon. You would always want a shield and a one-handed weapon. But I don't like an axe does a D6, a sword does a D8, so you better use a sword or you're a doofus.
Yeah.
I want to say, because I feel like we've not done anything to help actually help Alex with his question. And I think one thing that you can do to get people to play specifically basic or BECMI or OG&D or any of that is not call it by its technical name. Like if you go, we're playing BXD&D, that means nothing to a huge portion of people that would otherwise be interested in your game. Just call it old school D&D or 80s D&D or 70s D&D, depending on
Stranger
what
Things D&D.
Say it in those terms, I think people would be more, it's almost like a buzzword. You market it and you can get more interest.
And that's actually what I had to do with my group. I had a preamble that I sort of prepared, and this might work for you, actually, Alex. Is I was like, hey, we're gonna play D&D, but we're gonna play old school D&D, and this is my wheelhouse. This is the stuff that you can't say this part, but this is the stuff I make a show about. And I just sort of was like, all right,
I mean, he can say that no one knows.
Yeah,
Alex could
that's
have a
true.
show.
Alex could say he's either one of us. But, I sat everyone down and was like, hey, like, it's like the older version of the rule, so it's a little less mechanically savvy. Just keep in mind that, it plays more like a game than it does a simulation. So it's really abstracted. And it's more about dealing with, archetypes and things like that. So, there's a few weird rules, but once you get over them, I promise, like, it's the same experience you've had previously. And, I just sort of, like, explained, like, because people I tend to play with don't really like skill systems. Like, when you're going to try to solve a problem, you have to look at it as more of, like a logic puzzle. Like, how do I engage... Not how do I engage directly with the world to solve a problem versus what can I do on my character sheet to start, like, solve a problem. And that was something that they really resonated with, I think. So far, everyone's having a good time. Presumably. You just kind of have to, I don't know, like the primer for old school gaming by Matthew Finch is a good document to have around There's a huge forum post by Luke Crane where he sort of gives a recap of how like the rules work out. That is really good. I'll try to find that. Luke Crane, the guy who makes the Mascot RPG, Burning Wheel System, Torchbearer. He's a gigantic multi-cook nerd. So look up anything by him. And that can kind of give you some resources for how to frame this game as something you think that people would want to engage with. And I find that, stating why you love this game and, showing that passion for specifically why you like this version is enough to get people to try it.
Agreed. That was going to be my kind of spin on that think about what made you choose, BECME or BX, whatever you're wanting to play, whatever system. I mean, it could be freaking 4th edition, but whatever system you choose to play, look at the reasons why you chose that and use that as part of your sales pitch to other people to show what. And most importantly, I think any version of D&D, because we're so infused in a society now with not only D&D but fantasy, sci-fi. I mean, this stuff is everywhere, and so many of these words are now commonplace. Show what you can do with it, because a lot of people are not going to look at these older versions of the game and immediately think, I can do this with my imagination. Show what you can do with the system and use how you like the system as kind of a tool to do that. And then people say, wow, that's a really fun game. I want to try that out and play it.
I think getting into his second question, I think we kind of conveyed if we have any strong feelings one way or another about the aforementioned Mos Eisley style party. Yes, I have very strong feelings against it. Personally,
don't like it. Would not recommend.
Yeah,
I agree.
I guess that'll be our show for this episode, adventure, whichever. Adventure. I think it's adventures.
Adventure. We are adventures.
Yeah. So, again, for the Save or Die podcast, I've been Crispy.
And I've been Carl with special guest
Jonathan.
And, remember, like we have always said for the last 7 years, keep it classic, eat a classic.
Tell you something, brother. The Save or Die Podcast Immortal Edition is a production of Wild Games Productions, brother. It is produced for entertainment purposes only, Jack. All other uses are prohibited, dude. So be sure to visit them at saveordie.info for more information, brother. What you gonna do when the Save or Die Podcast runs wild on you? Ooh.
Lots of people kept telling me how to pronounce your name because they were saying that people get it wrong, it seems pretty easy to me. It's just Joe Manganiello.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Who has butchered it the worst in your career?
I was hosting WWE Monday Night's Raw Wrestling with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Hulk Hogan. And, we were, rehearsing, going over what we were going to do backstage. And Hogan would turn to me and say, all right, brother, one more time. How do you say your name? And I'd say, it's Manganiello. And he'd go, Manganiello, got it. And I go, whoa. Manganiello. Okay, cool. And then 20 minutes later, all right, brother, one more time. Manganiello. So then, fast forward to, we're about to go out. In front of, millions of people at home and tens of thousands of people at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And Hulk's got the boa on and the sunglasses and the do-rag, and we're waiting in the crow's nest to go out. And he turns to me and goes, one more time, brother. Manganiello. And he goes, got it. And they play the Hulk Hogan music. He goes down, slaps hands, gets into the ring, and says, I'd like to bring out a good friend of mine, the star of the new movie Sabotage, my good friend, Joe Manganiello.
Well, you couldn't have expected anything else, right?
Come on, man. Yeah. So I go into the ring, and I'm thinking in my mind the whole time I'm walking down, like, how do I make a bit out of this? Or how do I, hold on, brother, I got a bone to pick with you, Hogan.
Yeah.
But I can't, because we have to go into our script. And so I didn't get to say anything, and it just kind of ate at me a little bit, and I felt embarrassed. And then backstage after we'd finished our thing, Hogan was being interviewed, and he cut the woman off interviewing him, grabbed the microphone and said, listen, I don't care what anybody calls him from now on, because to me, brother, he's Joe Mania. And
but that's the great get out that Hulk Hogan has for anyone. You just put Mania on the end of it.
I forgive you. Like, I forgive you.
Yeah.
I'm Joe Mania. Like, we're even.
Yeah.
Tonight's guest stars for Monday Night Raw. The stars of the brand new film, Sabotage. Joe Magnioli and my good friend, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Let's give them a big, warm welcome, brothers.